what we're going to be diving in deep on today. And the reality is, some of you are a bit like me, and you have goals, right? And the crazy part is we're halfway through the year, right? Let that weight sink, right? So the great part is we're halfway through the year, and we can now really dive into where are you at on your goals? How are you doing on it? How are you feeling on it? What are some strategies to help you get back on track and maybe, kind of get some good self-reflection? So you guys should have in front of you, and if not, there's a few more around the room, but you should have a packet. So if you have a pen, you can write on it or you can just think about it. It's up to you, right? But I really want to take the time because the crazy part is, right, in real estate, everything has a lag time. So if you want to close out this year, strong and hit your goals, the reality is that you only have about 5 more months of working to get deals under contract. Right? Which is weird to think about. Huh?
Amazing news is we still have
The amazing news is you guys have 5 more months to get this. That's the right way to look at it. That is the right way to look at it. So that's what we're going to dive into today is this, because the reality is, I know a good amount of you came to the retreat at the end of the year. One of my favorite days, spending all just on your goals, what you want to do and what you accomplish. And the reality is inspiration helps, right? And I even know that because I've had people who go to it every single year and they're like, it helps me even though I forget to pull it out the rest of the year, right? The reality also then is clarity helps you change behavior. So knowing where you're at on top of that and what you've done up to this point helps you go to the next spot. So the goal, of course, is for us to know very much of where you're at, how you're doing, and to have ultimately a 30-day commitment to help you figure out what does that look like to get you back on track or, on track of what your new goals are after that. And that's what we're going to go into. Because reality is, right? Second half is what helps you to finish strong and helps you make the year the rest of the way you want. So if you procrastinated the first half of the year, then now we get to jump into it to make sure we hit where we want. So this is kind of one of the pages that I've given you if you've come to the retreat. And one of the things, if you look at the One Thing book or different things, is the 7 areas of life. Right? And the reality is that we can focus only on so much, right? But in each area, we need to have focus on that, of where we're doing, where we're at, what that looks like, what we want to achieve, and where we want to go with it. So this first assignment you guys have is to really think about, and I want you to kind of take a pulse on each of these. And I'm going to talk about each one, but on your paper, you have a few things you can do. One is ranking yourself on how you're doing, right? So for health, right? This is going to be how you're feeling. How is this vessel that we have? Are you doing the workouts that you wanted? Are you hitting your goal that you were thinking of? What are you doing and how are you feeling overall in your health, right? And ranking it from 1 to 10, right? When I joke, of course, with buyers, if they like the house, 1 is you're lighting a match and throwing it behind you. And 10 is that you're selling your firstborn child for the house, right? So that's the structure. Of course, it's going to be a little different because this is ranking it in the same way, but I want you to think of that. Where are you at on health? How are you feeling? What's the current reality in 1 word? If you had to put 1 word to how you're feeling on health, how is that? And then the last one is, what needs attention? Like for your goal, for what you were thinking, for what you were wanting in that one, where are you at on it? And what does that look like? The next one that you have is your soul. I always like to define this one because this one right here can go in a lot of ways for a lot of people, kind of in what you're looking for. So your soul, if I always think of like Chicken Soup for the Soul. I always think of those books that I don't know if you ever had, went in depth on there. Those are always, but like your soul, it's your internal self. It's your peace. It's your relationship with the spiritual being that you believe in, whatever that is, right? This is going to be, the soul is very much that aspect of that internal part of what you're doing.
Not allowed to use again is what?
You're not allowed to use 7. Yeah.
Like, wait.
Yeah. Yep. That is one of my rules for the retreat. So if you came to the retreat, then you know that rule. I am a strong believer that you can't put 7 because that's the cop out. That's the easy button to say, that's where I'm at. And you don't have to actually decide if it's good or bad. It's so true.
So how do people cross it out?
I know, right? It's so true. So, thank you. I'm glad you brought that up because that's very much, it is one of those things that I say. And it's the reality. So, where are you at in this, right? What's the one word that describes that of how you're feeling right now? What is a spot that needs attention, right? And if you have your goals from the end of, from the retreat, right? Or if you thought of these, and this is where you get to decide on what that is. You all right?
Just laughing at the noises I'm making about my responses. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Those are responses. Yep. I love it. Relationships. Is that the one you made the noise about? Yeah. Relationships. Okay, this one right here is the people in your life, right? I love this one because at the retreat, I usually go through the different kinds of relationships, right? And this is where, so this is not just one form of relationship. This is going to be, okay, your family. This is going to be with your friends. Might be with your spouse or something like that, right? This is your relationship side and how you're doing, right? And just for reference, right, you're only doing one number, but you can always look at it and be like, okay, overall happiness with my relationships, right? Last month's results, like how did I do last month? On pace for my goal, where am I at, right? Or, daily activities. What does that look like and how are you feeling with relationships? What's the one word? What's the one word that would describe that? And, what needs your attention? The one that I know some of you do really well at and others might struggle significantly. Fun. Fun. Are you making sure that are you hitting your goal? Did you have it where your fun goal was to go do some certain things? Was it that you're going to do, going on a cruise or having it where you are learning how to juggle or, Rollins working on that, but AI got him covered.
Oh yeah.
Right? What does that look like? Career. How are you doing? How are you on track for your career goals? The big difference I always like to specify between career and wealth. Career is you making money from what you do, right? Where wealth is building the next part. That's your wealth. That's your longevity. That is, I've seen some people's goals of buying a rental. Like, are you on track for that? That could be, okay, I put, 50 grand into this. This could be, hey, I paid off my car, right? There's a lot of different ones, but career and wealth. And the last one, which is a great one to think about, because of course, hey, Red Day, right? We did last week. That's a great way to give impact. But what and how are you feeling on that? And yes, 1 through 10, 7's a cop-out. So, and the reason I want to go through this and the self-reflection is because we're halfway, right? We're now halfway through the year. So depending on where your goals are at, what you are wanting to do, how are you feeling, what does that look like, and what's next, right? So you've been kind of working and filling this out. And what I want to look at is not necessarily, hey, look, how good or how bad, but I want you to go, what's maybe my biggest gap right now, right? We all have heard of a certain lie, and the lie is called a balanced life, right? You can't have a balanced life. You're not going to go work for 8 hours and then go play for 8 hours and then go sleep for 8 hours. Well, I guess that actually worked. But there's more than just that, right? That's the reality. So balanced life is a lie. If you go into the one thing says you need to be, it's a counterbalancing act, right? So maybe where's the one spot that you maybe need to put a little more focus in on for the next month? Where's the spot that you need to make sure that you're, maybe that you had a goal in that spot, but you realize that you didn't put enough focus, right? You didn't make it a priority. Because we know whatever you focus on expands. Whatever you have as a priority, you're going to draw those right activities in the right spot. And that's where this is that whole part of making sure that, where and what you're at. So what's your biggest gap right now? That's a question that you have at the very end of that. And is what does that look like? And if you're done, then great. If you're not, you can keep on working on it. You can also take the time to go look into this more. Because the reality is, you're doing business not just to go make money, right? You are doing business and building and doing that so that you can have the best life, the life that you want, right? Because that is what's the most important. So where are we at in all of these, right? Okay. So a good question is, what do you want the second half to create? What do you want the second half to create in my life, business and leadership? Right, second half of the year. I'm a huge fan of Jim Rohn, so I kind of was going through thinking about some of this stuff, and he ultimately has a lot of different philosophies, a lot of different training, a lot of different education. And if you've been in the world of personal development, then of course you know him, right? So I'm going to want to go through some of what he has, because he has basically what he would do is the 5 philosophies kind of help you improve in different ways of that. And his first one for that is actually like the 5 things that you need is the first one is you need to have your philosophy. Your philosophy, what you think is going to create so much in your life, right? So I liked and I appreciate how Jen said to reframe it, because that's true, right? Your philosophy is how you think about your life. It shapes your belief, decisions, and direction. So your philosophy determines whether you go for the disciplines or continue the errors. So this is where you need to have some thought. Okay, if I'm having it where through looking at these goals, looking at what I wanted to accomplish, and looking where I'm at, how am I doing? Is there something maybe with my philosophy that I need to work on, right? I talk a lot with you guys about, because what's going on in your head and is what produces the outcome. What are those philosophies that maybe are holding you back that you need to work on? What are those things that maybe, will help you build more confidence, get you in that right spot? Because then the second one that he talks about is attitude. And the great part is philosophy actually determines a lot about how your attitude is, right? And your attitude is how you feel about yourself, your future, and the people around you. And this is what's going to give you confidence. This is what's going to give you the ability to walk in and do something, right? This is going to be, that aspect that helps you do that. Because the reality is attitude determines how much of the future we are allowed to see, right? If we know, because we've done it before, if you are in the right mindset, in the right attitude, and you walk in and you go into a listing appointment, your chances are much higher of walking out with the listing, right? Whereas some days, of course, we got beat down, things happened, we let ourselves and our attitude not be in the right spot, and most often that reflects on how that deal goes, right? So our attitude and how we show up is going to be huge. But that's why these first 2, right? So philosophy and then attitude. And the attitude that you have is what's going to help you get to this next important one. And this next important one is activity. And the great thing with activity is this is the piece that determines everything, in my opinion, because activity is what you actually do with your philosophy and attitude. If you're only stuck on thinking things, and not doing things, then you're stuck. Right? This is going to be that benchmark that changes where you're at to what you want to do next is activity. So when I'm talking with people, we're having conversations about the other ones, because everything starts with mindset first, right? And a lot of the times that's kind of where you're stuck. The thing is, the next thing to do is go take the action. Make the phone calls and get the no's, right? Go and have it where you work on that in that way. Because what we know and what we feel merely determine our potential. What we do determines the results. So, right? How are you doing on your potential? Are you having it where your mindset is in the right spot so you can continue to get to the next level? And are we doing the right actions to actually get us there? Because the next one is results. And this is where it's great. You've now done the activity. We know results happen, right? And because results are the outcomes you produce from your actions, right? Results are the scoreboard. So the reality is this is what you actually get to track and see and be like, great, I'm hitting my goals, where and what. It also then, if you're having the results from what you're proving you're doing, right? It's really fun because then you get excited and it's the next, it's like, hey, the motivation's there, that kicks in. You get to see, you get that dopamine hit of being like, oh, like, look at this. This happened, right? Which is also tricky in real estate because the dopamine hit usually is so delayed, right? So that's where it's like, how are you doing that and being in that spot? Because results are the name of the game. And that's why we're doing this. That's why we're in business. That's why we're here in life, is we want to be moving in that direction, right? And then he talks about lifestyle. And that's that next part. Lifestyle is the life your philosophy, attitude, activities, and results eventually create. So the order of those things is what happens. And by having it be where you're doing those first things correctly in order and making sure you're moving, and I think it's a big circle, right? Is very much in this spot. So this right here is where, because lifestyle is an art of discovering ways to live uniquely. And this gives you that ability to really keep on moving forward in that way. So what I have on here is, if you're thinking about it and you're like, all right, and that second page I have, okay, Jim Rohn's reset, right? What's your philosophy? What do you believe is actually possible? Where are you actually at in your head of what you can actually do? And do you need to expand your thinking? Right? Next part, and that's where you can write down what your answer is. The next part is, the attitude. How do I need to show up? Right? What is that? How do I need to do that? And how am I showing up? Right? Are you showing up in that positive headspace? Are you giving yourself in the morning time to center yourself, or are you looking at your email right away and letting other people's priorities direct your life? Right?
That includes a spouse, by the way. You have
Yeah.
to be mindful of that.
Yeah, and that's where, right, there's other people in your life. That's why you're doing things, right? But yeah, are you in that spot where, right, you're having the time to know where you're wanting to go, right? One of my coaches right now is telling me to look at my goals 5 times a day, right? I still am getting better at that, right? But where are you at and how are you doing that? And are you at least looking at that in the morning? Activities, right? What is something that needs to be the non-negotiable? Right? What is the lead gen activity, the follow-up activity, the different appointment setting that you need to be doing that is something that needs to be non-negotiable? Results. What is the scoreboard telling you? Like, how are you actually doing? And here's my question for a lot of you. Are you actually keeping score?
I love how you just look at me.
Yeah. Right? The reality is, as entrepreneurs, we're not the best at that. So are you actually keeping score of how you're doing? Right? And then the last one, lifestyle. What will winning create for you? Right? What does this look like? Right? And we can take it the other way. If you don't do these activities and keep on winning, what will 5 years look like for you? 5 years from now? What spot will you be in if you keep on doing the same thing you're doing now? Right? So with that, this is where you get to then think through and now do a full-on audit. And I want you to kind of like take the time, go through this later if you need to, even more in depth. Think about this, right? Like, what was my goal for 2026? Of course, we talked about the 7 different areas. We talked about that. Like, but what is your goal? And where are you at on that? Are you on track? Are you behind? Are you completely ahead? So now you can say, great, I'm going to focus on the fun side because you realize that's your gap, right? Then go take a trip for 2 months. Like, you have permission if you're that much ahead. Right?
Funded that 2-month trip.
You, because you're ahead of your goals. Yeah. Right? Yeah, that's it. I did hear that. Yeah. I love it. So, okay, the next part is, right? What does the first activity level has been? Like, what have you been doing? How well have you been showing up for yourself? Life happens. That is the reality. I guarantee things came up in your life that you probably either weren't expecting or happened and you had to do something with it, right? So how are you able to, and of course, then what's next? So what's the gap that I need to close? And what do I need to do or change immediately to make that happen? If you listen to the One Thing podcast from today, this Monday, they talk quite a bit about changing your habits and what it looks like. And one thing that they do say, which I've heard in a lot of different spots, but I really appreciated, sometimes as entrepreneurs, we pick too many things to change at once. So if you're wanting to do that next step, what is that one change that's going to help? And you make that a habit, right? To help you get there. Because habits compound and build upon themselves. Let's just keep on adding new good ones, right? That's why this is not an ending journey. Okay. So then the next part is very much your commitments. And this is going to be very much, hey, all right, we know database is a business, right? Database is your business. So how are you doing? What are your activities? What are your commitments that you need to do to help you get to where you want? And that's going to be very much the lead generation conversation, right? Okay, how many appointments set do you need? All right, follow-up touches. What's that going to look like? Having it so, okay, your database, what's that going to look like? All right, contracts written or signed. What do you need for there? All right, this is the scoreboard. This is where, know your numbers, know where you're at. Because what activities, if done weekly, would make your second half goals believable? Right? And then you have to choose. And you have to think through and say, all right, what am I going to do or choose to do less of or keep? Right? Because sometimes our biggest problem is we say yes too often. What are the things that we probably need to be saying no to be able to improve? I was just going through another lesson and it was really interesting and I'm trying to now push myself there. And it was talking about having AI do 92% of my work.
You don't.
I'm getting closer. I am getting closer. But it was fun. It was a fun activity that I gave my AI to do. And I asked it, how well am I doing? It's pretty funny. They said I'm 60%, so still not there. A whole bunch of different ones. Right? But that's where it's so what is your goal and what do you need to be saying no to help you make sure you're hitting your goal? Right? Because I know you guys are a lot like me. And you guys like to be helpful. You like to show up and be there for people, right? And of course we should keep on doing that. And at the same time, what are the things that we need to say no to because it wasn't the priority that we needed to have it focused on our mind for the day? It wasn't part of our 20% to help us get to the next level. All right? Where do we need to do to continue to do that? And if you need, right, it's like, where are you going to report? And I would highly recommend this, take this information that you just wrote out, scan it, give it to your AI, and have a full coaching appointment around it. Say, hey, I need you to look at my calendar and tell me how am I doing to actually make sure I'm hitting my goals. Right now, I just set it up so every single day my AI reaches out to me with my goals, and then it fills in all of the empty space that I have for me to actually hit my goals. And surprisingly, it's what I tell you all the time, and it says, you need to make more conversations. So then it puts it on and says who I should call. And I'm like, blah, all right. You want me to go talk with 8 more people in this hour and a half that you just booked for me, right? So, but that's the kind of the cool part. Like, how are you making sure that you are helping yourself stay on the right track to be in the right spot to help yourself get there? Because that is the reality is this is where we've been going in a circle, but talking about what are those habits that you need to be forming to be able to help you get there. I'm a strong believer, and actually that was one of the things that Jim Rohn was talking about. It was Jim Rohn's, one of his people that taught him. He said that, almost everything that you want to do, like if that's like being fit, it really comes down to a half dozen core principles that if you put in your life, it would make 80% of the difference. So what are those core principles in any area in life that you know that you should be having as something that needs to be a habit? And go figure out and add one. What's the one thing in each of these areas of life that you know will make that difference, right? If that one thing changed, that one thing became a habit, that, everything would change. Yeah.
Say, rather finding out helping people, can we talk about social media or TV or shows or things like that?
100%.
I'm just thinking, helping people is also lead generating. It's also, giving back impact.
100%.
I think, service or helping people or things like that is actually helpful.
And that's not necessarily what I was saying. What I'm saying by helping people is everybody has their own objective. And if all you do is wake up every day and help them with their objective, then you might not be having going the direction you were actually wanting to go. I'm a strong believer in helping people. Zig Ziglar says that if you can make anything that you want in this world if you go help enough people with their problems. And I'm a strong believer in that. I think that is what we need to do. We are here to help other people in that way. What I mean is if you aren't thinking about where you need to be doing, how can you defend your schedule, then all you're doing is helping other people get to where they want and not actually what you're wanting to get to. And that's one of the things that we all do. That's one of the reasons in some ways it keeps us all in the mediocre status, because we all are just kind of running around, right? But yes, I definitely think cutting out some more TV and cutting out some more things like that would be another better spot too, right? But you can kind of figure that out. Good. So I have a couple books up here because the reality is, with wanting to grow, with wanting to improve, right? With wanting to hit more goals, one thing, of course, that is a great habit is continuing to work on your own growth, right? If that's 10 pages a day, if that is what that looks like, right? Or however, right? This is one book that I absolutely love, is Gap in the Gain, right? This book is very much about where people are looking, because most people, and we just talked about it partially, is where was the gap, right? And we don't focus enough on the gains that we actually took and how we got those gains, right? So if you did improve so far this year, what are those things that you did do to make that improvement? And celebrate those improvements. And that's going to help you then know what are the next improvements that you need to make to get there. Phenomenal, phenomenal book. right? So, where are the things that you can measure and show that you are making those gains? But great book. Look at that one. Another one that I recommend is the Identity-Based Goals. It's actually Atomic Habits, but this goes into very much of how are you, because of your identity and what you want, like what are those habits that if you change will very much make huge differences, right? So another one that I highly recommend, we actually went through last week. And this is just the power of the small. And this is focusing on, the process and focusing on what does it take to actually move that difference and make that difference, right? By chopping wood and carrying water, having it so that you're continuing to that and fall in love with the process. And another one, mindset. This one talks about stretch versus performance goals, right? And kind of what that looks like to help you get there. So great ways for you to continue to improve, right? I'm a strong believer in continuing to work on that and saying, great, how can we get there? And by far one of my favorites, right? If you haven't read it, you should, is The One Thing. And this, of course, goes through what's the one thing, what's that thing that will make the difference for you, the domino that makes everything else easier, and really a lot of that. So, look at your goals, look at where you're doing, look at where you're at and where you've grown, right? And let's go and really just make sure that in this next half of the year, we're crushing it and doing that much more of what we wanted. And just, if play with the counterbalancing act,